Good afternoon, everyone. Um, I think to understand personal data protection, we have to go way back when there was no personal data protection. Vietnam just has it now. Malaysia, 2010, only enforced in 2013. So it's only 10 years old in Malaysia. It started in 1973 in Germany. The first data protection legislation was in a German state called Hessen. Why did it start in Germany? Because of the Nazi rule prior to that, where they did not care about personal data or any form of privacy. They could enter your homes, take your documents, take you, right, as a person, the whole body. So Germany felt very upset and angry for years about personal privacy data protection. That's why in 1973, the German state of Hessen passed a law. Then in 1978, the German federal government passed the Data Protection Act, the first in the world. Right? 1983, the German court held that the right to informational self-determination is paramount. So that's where it all began. Things were very quiet in Asia. Nothing happened in Asia. Nothing happened in Asia until 1995, where the colonial government in Hong Kong enacted the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance. Now, I'm always thinking why Asia took so long. And then I recall a story from my childhood. So I used to watch a lot of American television, and there was a show called Boy Meets World, where this boy was dating this girl called Topanga, and she was a very fierce girl, and she always, when her mother said something to her, she always answered her mother back in the most forceful terms. Now, my mother, she had a habit of always coming into my room and opening my drawers to see whether there's any letters from any girlfriends or any naughty things. Now, I thought that was an invasion of my privacy at the age of like 9. And but I could do nothing about it. Then I saw this show, Boy Meets World, and I saw Topanga when her mother came into her room and looked at her letters. She shouted at her mother and told her mother to get out of the room. And I thought that was brilliant. That's what I'm going to do. So when I was 9 years old, just before school holidays, my mother obviously did the same thing. And I said, please get out of my room. And my mother said, then you are grounded for the whole of the school holidays for 21 days without parole. So I was stuck at home for 21 days. And then I decided I had no right to privacy. Right. So I think from an Asian perspective, why did it take so long? Malaysia 2010, as I said, Hong Kong was early, but the colonial government there. I think it's because privacy as a matter of culture was not important. Asian culture does not value so much privacy. In fact, it invites non-privacy. Everything is open. You should not hide anything from your parents, so to speak. So it was never really important as a matter of culture. Now, why did Malaysia enact the Privacy Act? I can tell you, it's not because of Malaysians. It's not because they wanted to protect our rights. Malaysia wanted to create the Silicon Valley of Asia, called the Malaysian Multi Super Corridor. They wanted to bring in Amazon, Google, all of those people. Then they go to Google and they say, hi, Google, come over. Google said, do you have a Personal Data Protection Act? No, we don't. So I have the reading of the act here in Parliament. Every section of this says, this is for commercial purposes. Nothing in it mentions individual privacy. In fact, when the minister opened the session, he mentioned speed up e-commerce. It is a factor to draw investors from overseas. And they looked at it as some kind of a cyber law for the implementation of the multimedia supercorridor. That was what happened in Malaysia, and that was why we had the personal data protection. Now, but it wasn't so bad, because I have to tell you that we don't only rely on the Personal Data Protection Act in terms of privacy, because Malaysians still could go to court under the common law and argue for protections. This one case, Ultra Dimension and Cook Wei Kwan, was an early case about privacy. In this case, Ultra Dimension was they were like a marketing agency, and one of their clients wanted them to produce a pamphlet about kids playing in a playground. So they went and took pictures of kids playing in a playground. The parents got upset, and they said that they took the company to court to say, hey, I see my child there, you're not supposed to take the picture. In that case, they failed. The parents failed. The parents failed because the court said, it's really innocuous, nothing too serious about it, right? So they did not have that right. But things changed a little later. Can I have the next slide, please? Sorry. Yeah. This was a case of Maslinda Ishak and Muhammad Tahir Osman. In this case, Maslinda Ishak went to a club for a party. That club was raided by the authorities, and they brought them to the trucks, and they were forced to do a drug test on the truck itself. So you have to give a urine sample, and while she was doing it, the enforcement officer took pictures, and the court stepped in, and she won some damages from the authorities who raided the club. So this is the common law stepping in. I'll just give you one more case. This is interesting. I like this case. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is two neighbors fighting, right? I don't know if you like your neighbor or not. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, neither do I. So anyway, two neighbors continuously fought over months and months and months over all kinds of things, where you park your car, you park too close to my gate, all kinds of things. One of the neighbors decided to put 5 CCTV cameras in his front porch, and one of the CCTV cameras actually pointed directly into the neighbor's house. The neighbor complained because the neighbor said, hey, you can't do that because you are invading my privacy, right? So what was the argument in court? The argument in court was, I need the CCTV because of security, right? The court held that 1 out of the 5 cameras had to be dismantled because it was a breach of privacy and it was not needed for security, right? So although Malaysia was rather late comparatively in terms of data protection, it still had the common law to protect privacy, right? Now, back to Malaysia. So we have the act. We've had the act for 13 years. It is extremely weak. In fact, on paper, the Vietnamese personal data protection decree is far better than the one in Malaysia. Right? The Malaysian one is limited to commercial transactions only. I think the Vietnam one is wider in scope. Next slide, please. Well, one more after that. Yeah. In Malaysia, the Personal Data Protection Act does not define consent. Right. So the most important principle of personal data protection is the principle of consent. You have to get the data subject's consent. Now, it just says get the consent. That's all. But in Vietnam, it actually says you must, how you get the consent. must be in writing. And there are certain other, I won't get into it, but there's certain other requests. So that consent must be real. In Malaysia, sometimes just a simple notice to you by email can amount to consent. And that's pretty weak. Next slide, please. So this is great in terms of Vietnam, because in Malaysia, if there's a breach, there's no obligation to notify under the Act. Although some companies do it because of pressure from their possibly parent companies overseas, there's no, you can keep quiet if there's a breach. In Vietnam, interestingly, the controller must inform the Department of Cybersecurity within 72 hours, which is great. Next slide, please. Sorry, the one before. Yeah. Yeah, next one. The next one. Oh, it's just jumping. That's okay. So those are some of the differences. So in my slides, which is pretty long, you can have a copy of it and have a read. It's all there. So I have got 5 minutes left. Now, you might wonder if there has been enforcement in Malaysia. Can I have slide 20? So I've mentioned some of the weaknesses in Malaysia about personal data protection. The other weakness is the enforcement, while it happens, so you can see it's been around since 2010, 2013. It's only 4 instances where the Personal Data Protection Commissioner has taken action. And if you look at the financial penalties, it's very, very little. Very, very little. 37,500 ringgit, which I think is about maybe just above 7,000 US dollars, thereabouts. So those are some of the breaches and very poor financial penalties. So the protection of personal data in Malaysia has a long, long way to go. I know there are some questions about the implementation and also about the personal data protection officer. Maybe I don't know. Hai, do you want to touch on that first?
Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. David.